He talks about the way you dress. He talks about making sure your payers are nice before you leave the house. Showering, making sure you're not offending anybody with the odor. Just the most basic things. And Moharash used to say that when the guys were living by him in his house, he teaches them how to make breakfast, how to clean up, how to do laundry. The most basic functions that a person needs to know to exist.
Shavua Tov Itai, Shavua Tov to our special guest, Rav Aharon Halevy. We're so delighted to have you. How are you, Rabbi?
Happy to be here.
That's great. That's wonderful. And we want to welcome our listeners to a new episode of Open Book with Eitan and Itai. Today we're going to talk about the very special, very holy Moharash, the Tzaddik from Yavniel. And we have with us one of his students. And we're so excited about that.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit about your personal connection and relationship with the Moharash. Maybe share a story. You mentioned faxing him in the past. You told me about fax. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what that was like,
Yes, well, it starts many, many years ago when I was 16 years old, actually. And I was sitting having a pizza in a kosher pizza shop in New York. And one of his students came in, handing out pamphlets and handing out books. And I remember he was so warm. He made me feel like he's my best friend, even though I met him, 10 seconds. And he asked me if I know Hebrew. I said, I know Hebrew a little bit. He gave me pamphlets. He gave me books to read. And he gave me a hug, and we danced a little bit. He was a real Breslov, in his heart and soul, completely.
You danced outside. You danced outside the pizza shop, in the pizza shop.
No, right there.
Before the Corona times.
15 seconds. A real Breslover danced in the pizza shop, not outside the pizza shop. He's not embarrassed with anybody. And I put it in my shelf, and I forgot about it. I went on with life, and then one Shabbos, I was like, hey, maybe I should read that book. And I read the book, and of course, I don't know who wrote it. I thought Rabbi Nachman wrote it. It doesn't say who the author is. Moharash never wrote that he wrote the book. It said, inspired by the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. Right. I'm reading this book, and it's telling me about speaking to God and having faith, and everything is for the best. And I'm like, I never heard these concepts before, And it was just life-changing. And so every Shabbos, during the week I was busy with work, school, but on Shabbos I would always read these books.
Wow.
And I never knew who wrote it. I thought it was literally Rabbi Nachman writing it. When I got a little bit older, I realized it wasn't Rabbi Nachman, but I didn't know who it was. Until one time, I was in Yavniel, and I see the pamphlet on someone's table, and I tell the guy, for almost 20 years I'm wondering who writes these books.
Wow.
So he tells me it's Moharash. And he's going to be here this Shabbos. Split his time between Brooklyn and Israel. That's proof. That's a sign that you have to come for Shabbos. You have to meet the Moharash. He's your rabbi. He started getting excited. We started dancing, of course. And he said, "You're coming for Shabbos." And that Shabbos was not the first time. Actually, I skipped a very important part of the story. I skipped a few parts of the story that are very, very important. About 5 years before this story happened, I was in Brooklyn, and I was looking for a minyan. And some chassid said, come, we're looking for a minyan. You're the 10th man.
Right.
And I go in, and I daven with this minyan. And who's standing there? Moharash.
Wow.
I didn't know it was Moharash. Only later on I found out that I was davening with Moharash. So then I'm in Yavniel many years later, and this person tells me that Moharash writes these books, and he tells me the whole story about the Moharash, and everything came together. Age 16, getting the pamphlet, meeting the Moharash for a moment at his yeshiva, davening mincha with him. And then that Shabbos, I met him really for the second time in my life. And it was a very life-changing moment. And, he had his tish, and he had the shalosh shuddas together with the Hasidim, and dancing and Divrei Torah and everything. It was wonderful. And a few years later, we moved there. And we merited living there for 9 years.
Wow.
And Moharash, he used to receive thousands and thousands of faxes every week. But if it said Yavniel on top, that you live in Yavniel, it always got priority.
That's nice.
So he used to write us back a lot. Sometimes he didn't write us back, but whatever we asked for, whatever we were talking about, things worked out. Because I'm sure he prayed about it.
One thing I want to mention is that I'm looking at Itai also while you're speaking, and the smile I see on his face is a very unique smile that I see on people's face when someone is talking about a tzaddik. You see the smile. I'm sure, I hope I have it too, but it's so special.
Wait, Rav, I wanted to ask, do you remember what book was it? What pamphlet?
Yeah, I remember he gave me a few pamphlets and a book. The book was Erchapayim.
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite.
We have it here.
Yeah.
I learned it with you.
Pamphlet, my Hebrew was decent, but he gave me a few pamphlets in English also, so I read the ones in English. The ones in English were more, affected me more than the Hebrew ones. My Hebrew was not so good back then. But I remember the Arab time I put in my car, like a lucky charm. I never opened it. My Hebrew wasn't good enough, but it was always in my car. I was very proud of it. But the English one, read every Shabbat. I think it was talk to God or something like that. It was about Hitbodedut, definitely.
One thing that's special for me personally about the Moharash is that I find his Hebrew, for me, because Hebrew is so hard for me to read, I find his Hebrew easier than the English, because he talks, and I want to talk about it later in the show, but he has such a straight to the point way of speaking that makes it very easy for a foreigner to be able to figure it out. One thing I wanted to ask you, that you mentioned in brief in the past when I spoke to you, but we never inquired further into it, is you mentioned that when the Moharash started to sell the books at cost, that wasn't well received by other people in the Jewish community, other people in the Breslov community. Would it be okay if you spoke a little bit more about that and filled us in?
Yeah, I'm not a complete expert in those matters. I only know what he told us. He used to tell us, and I heard many, many classes from him, from his own mouth. He always told us, if you hear something secondhand from a tzaddik, it's 99% probably not true. You have to hear it directly from a tzaddik. When you hear it from a tzaddik, then it's the truth.
Wow.
So I heard it from his mouth many times that he said, and other Breslovers, quote unquote Breslovers, hated me because back, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, probably in the early 60s, he started, selling the books at cost price because he didn't care about money. He wanted to make sure that the books got out, and there was people that were making parnasa from selling books. So of course, what would you rather? Get a book for free or pay for it? And they were making parnasa, and therefore they made up lies about him. They didn't just come out and say, "We want money." And this rabbi is giving it out for almost free. They made up lies about him, and they started attacking him. And he didn't care. He's like, this is my life mission, to get out the word of Rabbi Nachman to everybody, especially to young men. That was his main goal.
Nice.
So that's really all I know about that.
Questions. Yeah, Bechavon.
I have to say, I feel it's really true because I walk around a lot in Jerusalem. And if you'll need to buy books, you won't buy unless you heard a lot of good things about it. But when there's a guy that gives you, and as you said, with a warm smile and a dancing, it happened to me a lot in Tachana Merkazit, next to the Kotel, and they give you like a small thing. They tell you like, if you have time in the day, read it, and right. It's really nice and it's really, really warm. And I think that without that, it will get to less people to know about it. And it's also because it's people give it out free, you have to get it from someone. And when he speaks about it, you meet another human being, another Jewish. It's really nice. It's not like going and buying a book. You get it from someone. And it's really nice, and it's really deep.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out is that it's hard to go into a synagogue in Eretz Yisrael and you don't see a book by the Moharash. And you can't say that about every Jewish writer, and I don't know if you can say that about any other Jewish writer. That's what I think. Anyway, so the commercial we're going to do is actually about Machon Meir. Yes, this is specifically for people in Chutz La'aretz who want to get in touch with their Judaism. They want to hear a class. Maybe they want to learn one-on-one with someone. Well, they can do that now. If they reach out to Machon Meir, they'll set something up for free, no cost, because Machon Meir's whole mission is connecting to every Jew, connecting Jews to a passion for Eretz Yisrael. And there is an email address. Rav Halevy is actually going to know it.
Yes, so unfortunately it's not such an easy email to remember. So maybe we'll repeat it twice. So it's English 1, English and the number 1, at emeir, E-M-E-I-R, .org.il. English 1.
English 1.
Emeir,
at EMEIR
.org.il.
And
let's go to the website, and all the information is there.
Right.
And my phone number is there, and the email address is there.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and just you've taught and learned with people in Machon Meir, and me and Itai have both gone to Machon Meir, and life-changing experience. Machon Meir is our home. I think we can both say that. And so we really suggest people check it out. We're going to continue with the show now. There's something I want to ask you about that maybe not everyone knows about, and I think it's important people know about it, and I think it's important that there's a discussion. The Moharash and Yavniel would, you can tell us more about it than we can tell the listeners, but he would have young people marry, sometimes as young as, 14, 15. He would do weddings, and according to Israeli law, it wasn't legal. We can say the law right now. I wanna know from you, because you've heard it from his mouth, as you mentioned. What was his viewpoint, and also what are your personal thoughts regarding that? If you can tell us, tell us at length. By the way, we're interested.
Well, stop me if you have questions. But anyway, I heard many dozens, maybe hundreds of classes from the Moharash over the years, and I never once heard him say an age. He never said an age. He always said young. That Rabbi Nachman encouraged us to marry off our children, and the Torah encourages us. Right? It's not such a chiddush from the Moharash. It says 18 l'chupah, 18 to get married. And if you look at the commentaries, they say that's like the later end.
That's the deadline.
Or there says that. Yeah, that's like the deadline. So it's not such a big, novel idea that the Moharash just kind of like reintroduced the idea and encouraged it. But it wasn't like a groundbreaking idea. Maybe in modern times it is a little bit, I know, but he never mentioned an age. He always encouraged getting married young. What that means young, it's different for every family, for every person. 14 was very rare. 14 was, that was an age where the person was very, very mature.
Right.
I would say the average. This was the timeline. After the bar mitzvah, the young man would spend, would finish off usually, 8th grade, let's say, or 7th or 8th grade, and then for 9th grade they would fly to America, and they would be at the Moharash yeshiva for 2 or 3 years. And he would be teaching them directly. They'd be living in his house. His building in Brooklyn. In one building was his house, the yeshiva, the dormitory, and the cafeteria. It was all in one building.
That's intense.
So they were always like members of his family, and it wasn't such a big building either, and there wasn't so many students. When I visited there, I saw maybe 15, 20 students. So you went there, you spent 2 or 3 years there, and once he felt like you were mature enough, he would send you back to Israel, and you start going out on shidduch. So it was 16.
Would he also send Americans to Israel?
No. He also had a kehillah. He also had a congregation, in Brooklyn. But his main congregation was the one in Yavniel. That was the main focus.
Wait, Rav, you said he was in Brooklyn. He had his yeshiva, but his congregation was in Yavniel.
Yes, well, he had several congregations. He had 2 or 3 congregations in Brooklyn, but they were more small. And he had like a different Rav running that congregation. But his family main congregation was definitely in Yavniel.
Did he come to Eretz Yisrael?
In a house in Yavniel, yes. He used to come like once a month, once every 6 weeks, spend a Shabbos or 2 in Yavniel, and then go back.
I want to get back, if it's okay, to the young marriage issue. Do you think that that's a law that? Yes. Do you think that's a law that needs to be changed? If you're comfortable answering that.
Yeah, no problem. In most countries, it's not actually 18. Most countries, it's actually 17, and in some places, it's even 16 with parental permission.
In America,
so
it's
definitely in a place where you have such a large concentration. Yeah. So in Israel, we have such a large concentration of Hasidim that have their own kind of custom when it comes to marriage. There definitely should be a law that allows, families, if they consent, that the couple could get married young. I think it makes a lot of sense. But again, he didn't pressure anybody to get married. It wasn't like in the news, in the Israeli news, it came out as if he was forcing people to get married and fixing people together. It was never like that. It was always encouraging once the couple was ready to get married. He never forced anybody.
Unfortunately, I didn't merit to meet him personally, and I also wasn't in Israel during the time to see such news like that. Was it the news really kind of took it to the cleaners, kind of? You're saying they really put a bad spin on it?
Yeah, the main articles and reports were a little bit before I moved to Yavniel, so I missed the brunt. But there was a period where he didn't come to Israel for a couple of years because they said they would arrest him if he arrived.
Really?
So he kind of laid low, stayed in America. Yeah, that was around the time when I met him the first time when I actually davened at his shul, and someone there told me that they told me a little bit about him, and they said he spends his time in Israel, but now he can't go because of legal problems. So I actually heard about that back then, but then the legal problems kind of worked themselves out, thank God, and then he started coming a lot more until he got sick towards the end and then he was able to travel a little bit less towards the end of his life. Yes, but that was his main goal was to give chizuk to young men and women, young people especially, and to marry and to encourage them to get married young. But for somebody from America, getting married young might mean getting married at age 20. That's all considered very young for an American.
Do you think there's a maturity gap between young people in America and young people in Israel?
There is a little bit, but also there's a difference in mentality. The people growing up in Yavniel know about, their older brother got married young, and they hear about it, and it's part of the culture, so it prepares them more to be ready to get married young. But what the Moharash would tell this person, that's fine. It's totally normal. We don't expect you to get married when you're 17. However, don't push it off. It's a very important mitzvah, and it's a very important mitzvah that also includes you're watching yourself and keeping yourself holy. Don't wait till you have, a master's degree and $1 million in the bank before you get married. You don't need those things to get married.
Yeah,
you need a little bit of maturity and a little bit of a plan, and you're fine.
Yeah, there's something. Hopefully, it's okay with both of you if I share that I got married recently. You were actually one of the two witnesses in my wedding, and when me and my wife got married, we both didn't have jobs, and it worked out. Like we had a vague plan, but what's the price, both financial and spiritual, of not getting married sooner? I guess you could say. So I'd like to transition over to something a little bit more, even though maybe from a certain viewpoint it shouldn't be controversial. Maybe we can move to something a little bit less controversial and talk about something that I'm very passionate about, which is the Moharash's writing style and the sweetness of his words, how beautiful he spoke, Ahavi, Beni, very beautiful. And we were wondering, I want to hear also what you have to say and also what Itai has to say about it. So Rabbi, if it's okay, how does his writing make you feel? And how does his speaking make you feel? Because you also merited to hear that.
Yeah, very good question. Well, first of all, I know he loved every person, every Jew, especially every human being. He had a lot of love in his heart, and he took it as his goal to break down Rabbi Nachman's words into the most simple, fundamental, basic understanding that everybody, no matter what level of intelligence you're at, will be able to connect to Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman was his Rav. Rabbi Nachman flowed in his heart, in his soul, in his blood, and his whole goal was to really bring it down to the most basic level. That's why his writings seem to be very basic and very simple, even though they're hiding very deep concepts. And the way to get it into people's hearts is, of course, through love. And that's why he always wrote, Ahavi Bani, my beloved son and daughter. That was his style, to really bring it down to the most basic level of understanding, and with a lot of love. So it goes into the heart. Whatever comes out of the heart goes into the heart.
Wow.
Yeah. And another thing that's very important to point out is that so Rabbi Nachman's teachings tend to be somewhat complicated, but Moharash, his speaking style was he would repeat the same things over and over again. I always came out of classes from the Moharash with like something that I have to work on this week. It wasn't like a theoretical,
wow.
It wasn't a conceptual, class. It was always, I got to work more on, reading the Parsha every day. I got to make sure to at least do it a couple of minutes each day. I have to increase, Avat Yisrael. It was always something very practical that you came out of the shir that you wanted to do that, right away. It was never a theoretical shir on the Parsha, or it was always something very, very, very fundamental and important that you have to incorporate into your life right away.
That's amazing.
I have actually an interesting story.
Of course, yeah.
This past Shmini Atzeret, Erev Shmini Atzeret, there was a wildfire. There was a forest fire right next to my house, the Erev Shmini Atzeret, and we were evacuated. And they told us we have to leave our house. We had nowhere to go, really. And this is like during the Corona times. And so my wife said, let's go to Yavniel. She has a good friend there who has like a room that we could all stay in. So we went to Yavniel for Shmini Atzeret out of nowhere. Like we were planning on staying home. Suddenly we're in Yavniel for Shmini Atzeret. Of course, Yavniel is a very, very hot place throughout the year. Well, not in the winter, but, this was still, at the end of the summer, it was very, very hot. And my wife's friend lives on the bottom of the hill. And Moharash, Tzaddik of Yavniel, he's very on top of the hill. It's a big schlep, a big climb in the heat. But she said, let's go pray at the Moharash. I was thinking maybe Motzei, Shmini Atzeret, we'll take the car. But no, she said, Shmini Atzeret is the holiest day of the year, one of the holiest days of the year. Let's go to pray by the Moharash. So we go up, we get to the top, we get to the kever. There's nobody there. Maybe there's one woman on the women's side. On the man's side, there's nobody there. So I say, Tikkun HaKlali, do some mitboda dudes. And I take out one of his books. And one of the customs in Yavniel is if you had a question, he opened up the book, Moshe's book. He has a book of questions and answers called Sher Banachal,
Right.
with literally tens of thousands of questions there. And I didn't usually do this. I don't like, Lucky Charms and all kinds of, segulas. But I'm already there at Zeret. I'm in the zone. I take out his book. What does it say there? It's a very short letter. It says two things. Make sure to be very, very careful to start over now. We're starting the Torah over now. Make sure to read Shtay Mikra Char Targum. This is Shmini Atzeret. We're finishing the Torah now. We're starting over. Make sure to be very careful to read the parsha every week and be happy about it. And be very, very joyful with your 7 sons. I have 7 sons.
Wow.
What a coincidence.
That's a good one. It also
I literally was blown away. I told on to my chair so I wouldn't fall down. It was just exactly what I needed. To start over, reading the parsha. You were starting Bereshis that week.
I wanted to say,
it was an unbelievable chizuk.
Bli Ayin Hara, the story also gives us an indication of how holy of a wife you have also, for sure. That she insisted that you guys go up.
Sure. That's true.
I also, if it's okay, Rabbi, I want to take a moment and also I want to hear what Itai thinks about it. And
Yeah, but first I want to ask you, Rav, as one that heard his shiurim live, that was the way that he also spoke in shiurim, or it's a way to hand it out to people outside?
Yeah, he didn't speak like that in the shiurim. It was his style of writing. He'd always start off with a nigun, with a song. We'd always sing. There was never a class without singing first. You had to sing first. And then he would give a little idea on the parsha, and from that, he would go on to talk about, make sure this week to read the parsha with the Targum. And he would focus on that, and he would bring Chazal, why it's so important. Another time he would focus more on Hitbodedut. There was always like one or two ideas that he really hammered home, and he spoke about it. He brought Chazal, and you came out of the class like completely convinced that there's no chance you're going to miss the parsha this week. You're letting the Moharash down, basically.
That's amazing.
You wouldn't dream about not doing what he told you. It just felt very, very natural, and he came out of his heart, and he said, you know what? I know people here, some of you people are working 12 hours a day. Some of you have complicated lives. You might be sick, other problems. But how long does it take to open up a chumash and read the parsha? It's literally 3 minutes. There's no excuse. He'd be crying, begging you to do it. So, of course, he did it. And, of course, there's sometimes he would talk about current events. It would always be like a practical application to learn out from the current events, what we have to do in our personal lives to serve Hashem better.
It's too good of a question to miss, and for sure it's also in Itai's head now. I know for sure it's in your head now.
Maybe, let's see.
What do you think he'd be saying about right now?
That's a good question, and no way for me to know an answer. I don't think he would change much. I think he'd be like, Don't listen to conspiracy theories, and don't fight about all these things. The worst thing that's happening now is that everyone takes a side and everyone has their own side. He hated that. He wanted there to be unity between all the Jews. Don't let the confusion about these times, distract you from reading the parsha.
I have to say that because I've also been reading a little bit of Emma Banim Smecha. And one of the things that the rabbi starts off with in the beginning is how important solidarity is between Jew and fellow Jew. And he brings all these mekrot that basically say, let's do that first, and then we'll worry about the tshuva. And I think that's really not just also what it's like at Machon Meir and what the Moharash stance was, but today more than ever, it has to be through love, or it's not going to succeed. And he's someone that I can read and I also want to hear what you think about it. But he's someone I can read and just feel loved. I feel loved. He's really looking out. He calls us his sons. He calls us his sons. He calls every reader his sons, or his daughters, depending on which contrast it is.
Sure. Speaking of Machon Meir, whatever, he had a very special place in his heart for like the Tilumi guys that used to come for Shabbat. He just, because, he's always he's seeing constantly Hasidim with the Shtreimel. To see a guy with the Kippah Sruga, it was like a breath of fresh air for him. He loved it. He would take him and grab him and hug him and talk to him and give him chizuk. And during the time of Gush Katif, he gave like a live shir online, through the internet. He gave a shir to the people in Gush Katif, giving them strength, strengthening them and giving them chizuk. He loved the Tilumi, and he loved, he was a Haredi rabbi. He loved all the people that lived in, Judea and Samaria and the settlers. He had a very special place in his heart for them. And some of the people living in Yavniel, they didn't dress like Hasidim. They dressed just like regular national religious Datilumi type of style. He didn't care. He didn't look down upon them. He loved everybody. And a lot of times people came for Shabbat with ponytails and with tattoos and all these things. He didn't care. He loved everybody. He didn't look at the external.
And it sounds like it wasn't a gimmick to get people to come. It sounds like he really loved them, and everything that we work our whole lives for. It seems like he was there. You know.
Absolutely. A lot of other Hasidic rabbis, all their Hasidim look the same. But with the Moharash, it was the spectrum. Everyone looked different. There was different types of styles. There was Teimanim and Sfaradim and Ashkenazim.
Beautiful.
Ali Tshuva, everything in between. Absolutely.
So we're going to get right back to the show in a minute, but first I want to tell you guys about Pomerantz Bookseller. Michael Pomerantz has been selling books in Jerusalem for 30 years now, and during that time he's learned that the most important thing is his customers. That is why if you come into Pomerantz, well, you can't come in right now, but you can send them a WhatsApp, you can call them, you can send them an email, and they'll reach out back out to you, and you can get whatever book you want, books on Rav Kook, Breslov books, cookbooks, books on Jewish history, whatever it is you're looking for, you can get it. And if they don't have it, they'll be happy to get it in for you. Just reach out to them. Their phone number is +972 623 5559 +972 623 5559. If you call, message, or email with the code Moharash in the next 4 weeks, get a special discount of up to 10% off on most books in the store. Wonderful store. They really care about the customers. They don't want to just sell books. They want to make sure people are getting the right book. And so give them a call one more time. That number is +972 623 5559. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We're going to move forward now, talking a little bit more about the pamphlets. We spoke a little bit about that in the beginning. I also want to know what the Rav thinks the Mohorash's influence is today, and if it has potential to grow. Obviously, I think it grows every year. It grows every year for sure. But do you know a little bit, Rabbi, about the history of the Kontrasim, how that started, and also what do you think has come of that today? I mentioned a little bit about, there's not a synagogue in Israel without a book or a contrast by him, but could you expound a little bit more on that?
From what I remember, I think it began in his mid-20s. The story is that when 14 or 15, he was looking through his father's library, and he found a book by Rabbi Nachman. He never heard of Rabbi Nachman before that time. I think he was 15. He never heard of Rabbi Nachman. And he started reading this book. It was one of the books by Rabbi Nachman, and he received tremendous chizuk from it about Hitbodedut. And even though nobody spoke about Hitbodedut in his community, he was in a Satmar community, he started doing Hitbodedut secretly.
That's amazing. That's amazing to go from a Satmar to loving every Jew and Dati Leomi. Well, no, I don't say they don't love every Jew, but I'm saying that, wow, to go dafka, wow, that's because they're insular. Yeah,
they're insular.
They're insular. That's amazing. Rabbi, I'm sorry for interrupting you. That's amazing. Wow.
His Rosh Hashiva didn't like this. He would bring out Rabbi Nachman during the Seder sometimes and learn Likutei Moharan. And he got into trouble for this. But he said, come heck or high water, I'm continuing with my Rabbi Nachman. And he stood very steadfast and kept it part of his Seder.
Wow.
And one of the things that I remember most, that I really quote the most about the Moharash, is he said, I think it was between like age 16 or 17 and 21, around that time, till he got married. He used to finish, hold on to your seats, he used to finish Likutei Moharan every single day. Every day.
What? Wow.
This is a book of hundreds of pages, a complicated sefer, many parts of it being Kabbalistic, and he wanted to just internalize it. He wanted to ingest it. He wanted it to flow in his veins, and he did it for years. And this is unbelievable. This is tremendous accomplishment. And he knew the whole book by heart, and he used to quote it all the time.
By heart, wow.
In his 20s, he started writing little kuntrasim, mostly for young men, just to get them chizuk, concerning all the matters that Rabbi Nachman spoke about. And from that, it slowly developed into writing about other topics. And he had over 500 books that he published, the kuntrasim and books.
That's amazing.
So very slow.
That's
it grew slowly. Then it expanded to other languages, as we know.
Right. It's amazing. It's amazing that an outsider, so to speak, although no one's ever really outside, an outsider came into the Breslov world and had such an amazing and enduring impact. What do you think that? How do you think that he's changed? Let's start with, how do you think he's changed the Breslov world today? How does Breslov today look different because of the Moharash?
It's not so well known, but most of the Breslov leaders and rabbis that we have nowadays, they actually did tshuva because of the Moharash, including Rav Aharon. I think if you ask the man on the street, who's one of the main leaders in Breslov, they'll say Rav Arush. Rav Arush, he did tshuva after he found a kuntres and read it and learned about Rabbi Nachman. That was the main catalyst in his tshuva, and many other rabbis as well. And I remember being in Uman one time, and Rav Arush came to speak to Moharash, and he came with his entourage, and they sat together for hours speaking together. He had a very, very deep respect. Moharash had like a special room in Uman, where he would meet different people and rabbis over the span of Rosh Hashanah. And so I remember seeing Rav Arush being very appreciative and being very respectful of what he received from the Moharash, and many other rabbis also that are now famous Breslov speakers and teachers. They got their chizuk, and they got their start in Breslov from the Moharash.
You've been living in Israel, Baruch Hashem, a long time. What do you think is the biggest misconception about Breslovim that the average Israeli might have? And can you set the record straight?
Question. That's easy. They think that Breslovers are the ones that are jumping on top of the vans, blasting music, right?
Right.
And Moharash used to say that we need these people because these people distract the Yetzer Hara from the real work that we're supposed to be doing in this world.
What was it you told me one time about a man needs to have a seder every day, then needs to shower at the same time,
Yeah. So first of all, like I was talking about the jumping on the van, people know that's like Rabbi Nachman. That's a fringe, small group of people that are inspired by Rabbi Nachman, and the concept behind it is nice to go out and dance and be happy. What Rabbi Nachman was about following the Shulchan Aruch and being normal, and fulfilling the mitzvahs and fulfilling the Torah the way it's meant to be, not being strange. And it's very strange. If you look at Sichot Aran, he talks about the way you dress. He talks about making sure your payers are nice before you leave the house, showering, making sure you're not offending anybody with the odor, just the most basic things. And Moharash used to say that when the guys were living by him in his house, he teaches them how to make breakfast, how to clean up, how to do laundry, the most basic functions that a person needs to know to exist. Those are just as important. You have to have the basics. You have to know how to get along with other people. So Rabbi Nachman also himself, he said, I don't move from the Shulchan Aruch. First of all, the Shulchan Aruch. That's first of all. And also he used to say a lot, all my concepts of Hitbodedut and Emunah, this is nothing new. This is what Avraham Avinu, this is what Yitzchak Avinu, all of our forefathers, they were experts in Hitbodedut and their whole life with that Emunah. I'm just reintroducing, an old concept and presenting it in modern times, especially modern times, because it's going to be more necessary in modern times. And Moharash also knew that. Moharash knew that in this generation we need so much chizuk. And so many times, there's so many stories of someone just leaving behind like a kuntres on a train. For example, the kuntres that spoke about suicide, and someone wanted to commit suicide, and they happened to find this kuntres.
Wow. And
because of this kuntres, they didn't commit suicide, and then they came to the Moharash and told them the story. Moharash told us that this happened many times.
Wow, they should just put it on every seat on the bus. What do you? There's a question that I didn't plan on asking, but it jumped out. Did the Moharash have correspondence with the Rebbe Melubavitch?
Yes, I know. I heard a couple of stories. They lived very close to each other. Lubavitcher Rebbe was in Crown Heights, and Moharash was in Borough Park, not so far from each other. And they knew each other. I don't remember any specific stories. He used to talk about him a lot. He used to visit him, and they used to correspond. I know that he was very close to Rabbi Shlomo Karlibach, actually.
Oh.
And one of Shlomo's nigunim actually came down when he was visiting the Moharash. He was just so inspired by his love of Avat Yisrael and his emunah that he actually, some of his nigunim came down when he was visiting the Moharash.
That's really cool to know.
And the Moharash about it quite often. Yes.
That's kind of a little bit Ashkacha Prati, or a lot Ashkacha Prati, because actually next week's show we're planning on doing on Rabbi Karlibach, where we're not 100% yet, but so it's just wonderful. Very interesting. I can talk, of course, all night about the Moharash. We're even debating to do also an episode in Hebrew, me and Itai. But I think we'll finish up with one last question. Really want to hear your thoughts, Rabbi. And by the way, it's been an honor. This is the question. What can we learn from the Moharash today and going forward? Not just religious Jews. What can every human, not just every Jew, what can every human take with them about the Moharash?
Interesting question. So besides learning the parsha, the Moharash used to drill it into our heads. We would be ashamed not to go a day without reading the parsha. He would also say, you guys have to remember, a Jew and a person, mostly a Jew, always has to be doing one of three things: either learning, working, or giving chizuk to other people, what we call in Hebrew hafatzot, feet to distribute, kuntresim and Torah. You can't be a bum. You can't learn, go to work. You don't have work, go out and give out these pamphlets to people and give them chizuk and emunah.
It sounds like a depression cure almost.
And this also applies to non-Jews. There's lots of non-Jews that corresponded with the Moharash. And, like I said, the Kontresim are in many languages, and lots of non-Jews over the years have received a lot of chizuk from it. So the main thing is to disseminate and to spread emunah, especially the teachings of Rabbi Nachman are so relevant for nowadays. Some of the things he said were so prophetic that didn't make sense in his time, and now they make sense. Now we understand. He said that a storm of apikorsut, of heresy is going to come to the world, and even though you guys don't understand what that means yet, this is back in the 1800s. There wasn't such a heresy yet. I'm telling you this so you stand strong in the storm of heresy that's going to come, and the main way to save yourself from heresy is to go into the Tevat Noach, into the Ark of Noah, of Emunah, of Yipudadut.
Is that a common analogy, the Ark of Noach, and connecting that with Emunah?
Absolutely, yes. There's two types of arcs. There's a personal arc and there's a national arc. Just like with everything, there's the private level and the micro and the macro.
Right.
So a person has to enter their Tevat Noach, their Seder, their learning and their prayer and their Yipudadut and their faith in Hashem, and they're spreading the light of Hashem to others, right? And then there's the national goal that we're all supposed to be a nation of priests, a holy nation. That's on a national level. We have to get to that as well. Everyone has to do their own private part, service of Hashem in their own private lives and with their families.
I'm a little bit ashamed now that I don't read the Parsha every day.
I read.
No, you know what?
Now we'll need to read it more carefully. We'll need to read it.
It makes sense. It's our life source. It's the Jewish life source, the world's life source.
Yeah. Also, my rabbi says a lot. Parashat Hashavua. It goes with you through the week. Like you can read it and see stuff that you need to hear and learn about it this week. You can learn a lot about personal stuff that you need to hear. And Parashat Hashavua, it's really important. I guess, for sure, that's the reason that Moharash was so strong in that, because it's very, very important. I agree. I can't say more if Moharash said.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you guys for listening. Rabbi, thank you for joining us. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you again. And we want to let our listeners know, Bezrat Hashem, next week we're going to be speaking about Rabbi Karlebach, his writing and his music. And until next week, Shavua Tov. Banim Atem Lashem. 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 Oy